This is Steve Clark, President and CEO of the Massachusetts Restaurant Association. I'm here with VP of Operations Kerry Miller, and you're listening to the MRA podcast, Together We Win, where we give you bites of information in podcast form. And we are back with the newest episode of MRA Together We Win podcast. Kerry, what's going on?
You know what? We talk about different times of the year because we go do this every month, right? And I always say this is my favorite time of the year because it's New England, but this is kind of my favorite time of the year. Midsummer, we're cruising right now. I mean, the decks have been open, the bars have been open. I will not name the beach bar that I name every time that I've been to a couple times.
Beachcomber. We're going to get them as a sponsor.
We should. We give them too much. But you know what? Prime time in the summer, Steve. I know your kids are probably in the middle of sports. Mine are, I'm chasing them around to have them, get to work and stuff like that. But you guys got sports going on.
We're all revved up, ton of sports. My biggest concern is that we might get replaced by AI. Have you heard about the AI DJ that was out on the radio, and he actually did a full countdown and kicked it to commercials? So, it was really weird because even with AI, there was a racial content perspective of it, right? Yeah,
even AI can't behave themselves. AI has to go off the deep end.
Here's my real tinfoil hat conspiracy, and I don't like to espouse conspiracies too often, but all of us have access to ChatGPT, right? And that's out there, and there's whole new AI technology. That's what they let us have.
Right.
What do they have behind the scenes that we're not allowed to have access to?
Yep.
So,
when the head of Apple
it would scare you to know.
Absolutely.
Exactly. When the head of Apple comes out, it's the end of humanity with this AI stuff. You kind of have to take him seriously on it.
It's literally the start of every horror movie of the last 30 years is what's going on right now. So,
and if history will prove itself, those stories come true.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So that's my concern. So we have a great episode today. Episode number 2 of filming in person. It's really exciting. It actually creates a nice banter. I'm excited today. What do we have coming up?
Hey, you know what? Look at if you can get people that make wine and people that know more as much about restaurants as anybody at the table at the same time, you're going to have a heck of a lot of fun. So that's who we have here today.
We have wine, we have Vine Farmer, we have influencers, we have Paige Harding, who tells everyone in Boston where they're supposed to go before they even know it. So we look forward to having the conversation today. Welcome to the podcast. We have Jace and Caden Chaffee from Vine Farmer and Paige Harding, influencer extraordinaire from Dine Boston. How are you?
Good. Thank you for having me.
Thanks for coming. Gentlemen, how are you doing?
Doing great. Really happy to be here. Thanks for having us.
We brought Paige for a reason. We have the New England Food Show, and we have education sessions there. We had an influencer session, and Paige was on the panel. The most highly attended session at the New England Food Show this past year. So Thanks, Ben.
It was a fun one. We're sitting there and they just keep coming in, and we're not expecting that. We're all looking at each other like, okay.
System works.
Absolutely. Yes. And breaking news, Kerry. The New England Restaurant and Bar Show, February 4th and 5th.
Yes, it is. Look at it. So we're evolving like everybody else, right? You come out of a pandemic and you can't sit around, and we won't use the P word, but we did the P thing. And we moved from a food show, and we're going to be more specific in our offerings. It was going to be a restaurant and bar show, so you see more on the, especially more on the bar aspects of it. We have folks here with wine, so
yeah. Let's talk a little wine. Let's class it up a little on the podcast. Let's talk wine. Jason, Caden, how'd you get into the wine business?
It's a fairly long story. I'll keep it short though. It started for me very long ago. I've basically right out of undergrad, I was a typical college kid and drank a lot of beer. But out of undergrad, became really interested in wine and actually grew up with some wine before college. And I just became a full-fledged wine geek, got really into it, and started doing some things on the side with wine, doing some educational things, but more kind of, I'm an entrepreneurial person who really got into it that way. And eventually I got to the point where I was buying really expensive bottles, cheap bottles, and thought I was getting a good understanding of like really what wine was. And I thought I could start my own business in it, and really wanted to do something with a super deep foundation and to really commit myself to it. And essentially just decided to do it, but it was a long time coming.
Well, I'll tell you, if somebody that partakes in the beverage a lot, there's still a lot of noise out there, right? And there's a lot of uneducated folks, not because of any other reason, because there's so many offerings out there. And for you to identify what a really good $20 bottle of wine is, I mean, this in craft beer, I mean, there's just so many options out there. So are you guys kind of dipping your toe into teaching people how to find that right bottle of wine?
I think to an extent, it's yeah, I would say partially. We're more about me. I inherently think wine is complicated, right? You can meet wine wherever you're at, and it should be something that's approachable in that sense. But at the same time, we don't necessarily dumb it down. So we find that there are really good wines at all different price levels. There are imposters at all levels. And part of it is just being open to just exploring different things. And you kind of find your way, like water flows downhill, you find your way eventually. So that's the way that we think about it. And then if someone's getting into wine, that's the kind of thing I tell them. You have to get out there, you have to drink it, you have to keep an open mind, and you have to be in it really all the time. But there are kind of no shortcuts. It's maybe not what you're supposed to say, but that is kind of the truth of it. You really got to be in there.
I look at, for some reason, Braveheart just jumped into my head because you're taking on the Goliaths, right? You guys are like, how do you just determine? Because you think about the wine and the companies like Martinetti that have a whole, coastal, and they are the huge 800-pound gorilla, and you guys are in Franklin, Massachusetts. Nothing wrong with Franklin, Massachusetts. Yep. But, a couple smaller guys in the wine industry trying to get a foothold on it.
Right.
What are the challenges been?
I don't know that we look at the challenges as part of what is the strength of being small, where the people we're working with, they're not making a lot of wine. Most of the time, their wines are pretty heavily allocated and they don't have trouble selling it. So it ends up being about the relationship first. And they want someone that's going to come in and be friends with them and understand the wine and communicate it in the right way. I think some of the bigger shops are more non-starters for them in that sense. There's also this big generational shift in Europe happening right now, where the younger generation, they're out with something to prove, and they kind of want to work with younger people as well. And we could be in business with them for 20 or 30 years. So there's this depth of the foundation that can be built that really plays into a young startup like us.
And further point on that, a lot of these younger growers, they know that the wines won't get lost in our book with some of the bigger players. We'll give them the focus, we'll give them the attention, and give them the front row, so to speak.
It's something we're passionate about as well. We get excited about all these wines that we bring in. Some of the people we work with, when I'm daydreaming at night, I'm like, wow, this is so amazing. We get to have these deep relationships and work with the people that are just so passionate about what they do. And
so when I think about career pathing, I look around the table and I'm sorely disappointed in my choices in life, because all three of these people spend an enormous amount of time over in Europe and have the opportunity to travel and stuff.
Kerry, you get to hang out in Westboro, Massachusetts, working for the Mass Restaurant Association.
Come on, man. Wait a minute.
Come on now.
Let me rethink that again.
Come on.
Yeah. So Italy, right? You guys, everybody's just yakking about Italy. You were just there, Paige, right?
I did just get back from Italy, and my years in the North End, I was very fortunate that I met a lot of people that go back and forth from Boston to Italy, especially the Amalfi Coast area.
There are Italians in the North End?
Believe it or not, a lot of them. And I'm super fortunate that I'm able to go and have these incredible food and wine experiences, because for myself, I'm still dabbling into the wine world and trying the only way, like you said, to learn is just to put yourself in there. And that's what I've been trying to do.
Paige, how do you become an influencer?
It's an interesting one. So for me, I was a photographer. I started as a photographer and had been doing portrait for quite a while. And then one day, the truth of it is I looked at my finances, and I had been spending all of my money and time going out to restaurants, and I worked in hospitality for years. And I said, how can I do something that is, me being in the back end of hospitality, mutually beneficial for the restaurant and for me actually creating a career out of this? And I sat there at my desk at my day job at the time, and I started plugging in names online. And I typed in every name you could imagine, and then Dining Boston was available. And I looked at my coworker and I was like, I'm going to do this. And she was like, okay, Paige. And she was like, she goes, yeah, I'll help you. And she came to one. We would go to dinners, and we were paying for our dinners. We were just going to different restaurants, supporting restaurants, posting about them. And the goal was really to start doing some food photography in some form. The first year that I started was pre-COVID, and I was doing a lot of small places, and then COVID hit. And then I was like, wait, there's a big opportunity here to help these restaurants. And it was really the consistency of just posting and having this almost insane hope that it would perform and actually work. And then I had a picture of a brownie that got 23,000 likes. And at the time I had no following. And I was like, wait, this is going to work.
Onto something.
Yeah, it was just having this, it's almost this insanity of just, this is going to work, and just continuing to believe.
Are you ever able to turn it off? Are you ever able to go and have a meal and not feel that you need to share it with all of your followers? Or do you feel pressured that every time you're out, there's content, I gotta drive it?
It's a great question because for me, if I have an incredible experience and I'm there in my own time, I'm there with friends, family, whoever it may be, I feel obligated to share it because it's been so engraved in me to show people, hey, you need to go here, and just supporting all of these businesses. That being said, I try really hard to make sure that I can still be present with people and just maybe snap a quick photo and post a story. Or really the word of mouth and the relationships that you make in this industry are everything. So I may just enjoy it, put my phone in my bag, and then later on if someone asks me, like, hey, you need to go here.
Yeah, knowing our audience as well as we do, they have the attention span of a gnat. You know, they're highly relationship driven. And so anybody that has a new product that comes to it talks about the product, we always talk about relationship first, right? No matter how great your product is, they're worried about hot hamburgers and cold beers and
fine wines.
And fine wine, exactly, fine wine.
Speaking of, actually, sorry for the quick interruption. We did bring some wine today. Does it make sense to?
It could probably help me with my
dialogue.
It'll move the conversation along.
Exactly.
It's a bright idea.
Well,
it's almost the afternoon. I think we can do this, right?
Absolutely,
Definitely.
absolutely. While the wine is being prepared, you know, you're working with the people coming in the front of the door. You're working with people coming in the back door, hoping to acquire the front of the door, or talking to the guests coming through the front door. How do you work close hand in hand with restaurants and help them choose the right wine for their menu?
The first step is really understanding what the wine program, what their DNA is all about, and how we can sync up with them. If you don't, understand their audience, what they're about, you're going to start off on the wrong foot, and you really want to be able to kind of wow them with what we bring in. And at the same time, once we get a foothold, we understand what's going on. It's all about really supporting. How can we support them? It can be anything from staff trainings to hosting wine dinners. Sometimes the growers are out in person, which is always fantastic. And it's even cheat sheets for the staff. How do you phonetically pronounce something? Especially where we're working so much with Italian wines. A lot of these words, Italian's very phonetically, you pronounce every syllable, right? And it's like, it can be daunting looking at a word. It's like, what is this? So being able to give the staff like an easy way to phonetically pronounce it can be something very helpful.
It gives them confidence, basically.
Bingo.
Somebody with the name Steve Clark really appreciates that. I like that, adding in and highlighting all the different pronunciations that are there. So my simple name appreciates that.
I think Italian wines don't get the recognition that they have and the amount of energy that the government puts against, certifying, where they were grown, how many years they've aged. I'm a big fan of Brunello's. And so for you guys to be educating folks on that, I think it's because I think you go to a big wine store and you go, Italian section, where's a Chianti? Right? And you walk out with a bottle of Chianti. You don't know, like 2 bottles over is a really, really good Sangiovese or something like that, right?
You talk about wine dinners. We often talk about maximizing the restaurant space because restaurants are, we've talked about it before, how much rent they have to pay. They're only open a limited amount of time, reduced hours these days. It seems that private wine dinners and dedicated wine dinners have become kind of a new opportunity for restaurants to market to a specific group that's already a loyal guest, but then also you can get in and get a private opportunity to be in the restaurant. And it's a good opportunity for both guests coming in and the restaurant owner to maximize that empty space of a restaurant.
Sure.
Definitely agree.
You guys partnering with restaurants? So that's a great thing, Steve. I think so there's restaurants I go to because I know they got the wine list, right? And the food's, the food's good. And I'm sure in the North End, you can pin down 5 or 6 restaurants that have really cool food, but great wine to match. Are you working with restaurateurs and kind of helping them get into that niche?
For sure. Yeah, we most definitely are. And we do a lot of wine dinners, actually. We have fun with it. We like talking about wine. A lot of the people that go to dinners, they're obviously there to learn about the wine as well. And those are my favorite things to do. We do a lot of different tastings, but wine dinners at restaurants are always fun.
Now, on the social media front, can that be a hook for a restaurateur to have you take the bottle of wine and get it paired with some and push that out on social media?
Absolutely. There's so many different approaches that you can do, especially leading off of a hook. That's the most important thing on social media. If you're not getting their initial attention, they're not going to sit through even a 15-second video. And if you offer that, just this is what we're doing and why right at the beginning, and even if it's, have you ever had this before? that question, people are like, oh, I've never even heard of that type of wine. And then showing them what that experience could be, it just creates this curiosity where they're like, oh, wow, I want to experience that. I want to be a part of this.
And you're a new voice in the food industry. What does that mean? Do you get resistance from the old guard? Is it, what is the day-to-day like when you approach a restaurant who might, have some experience and been in the industry for a long time? How do they react to an influencer saying, hey, I can help you by doing X, Y, and Z?
Yeah, I think that there's a lack of belief at the beginning. And then when the results are so evident after the fact that people, they believe in it after, that there's no trust at the beginning because they're stuck in their ways. There may be some archaic means of just traditional marketing, and we're evolving. The influencer voice has become so loud, and it just continues to get louder. And with that being said, it can be an open conversation between the influencer and the restaurateur saying, well, how do you want to be represented? How do you want people to see you? It's not just the way that I see it. There's that relationship that's being built to make sure that we're adequately representing them. And the way that people see them is adequately put out there, and it's a beautiful thing. And then when you see someone that was really negative at first switch to that positive side, you're like, yes.
So a huge part of what we do is tell people to outsource stuff, right? Mm-hmm. And these people are like, they're entrepreneurs, right? They think that they can control the world, that they can control energy costs, they can control their insurance bills, and having partners where we can go say, look, take this off the table. You're not a social media maven. You're just not going to be. And that hostess that's been really kind of on her phone all day, probably not the one for you to do either. So outsource it. But at the end of the day, they're going to say, okay, if I spend my money and energy against this, what do the results look like? And what's kind of your proving ground? Is it that 23,000 like brownie, or is it,
So there's different ways to quantify how it's actually helping a restaurant. The biggest thing that I say to people is we can't pinpoint if you get a follower an hour after we post, that could have come from somewhere else, but we try to look at everything as this broad scope. So if we're posting and then maybe the 5 days after, what does the engagement look like? Are people actually looking at this? Like, it's one of those things that I've had a lot of restaurants give me feedback that we got messages, we've had all of these people, all these followers just pour in, it's directly correlated. But a big thing that I do say to restaurants, coming from hospitality, and I worked on the restaurant end for a while, is checking to making sure that you're working with people who are also Boston-based, because just because it's a follower doesn't necessarily mean it's completely beneficial. So it's making sure that you have Boston, Massachusetts-based followers coming in. You click them and you see someone's got, the South End tagged. You're like, okay, this is in the restaurant is in Back Bay. This is a potential person who could be coming in. This is great. And then the shares on the video are one of the best ways to show how something's performing. Because if I want to send it to my friend and on the video, it's a public metric now. You can say this was sent 300 times. So now it's doubling the reach. And you say, wow, people are talking about this. We want this to be talked about.
Yeah.
And more, and I think the numbers are starting to show that younger millennials, Gen Z, are actually getting into wine. Right? Is that kind of a market, a new market, an untapped market where they want to learn about it, they want to talk about it, or is that a new market that still needs to be developed and still needs to be manifested?
I think it's there, and obviously we hope that it is. Like, that's what everyone needs. I hear a lot of the people we work with in Europe in particular say that is happening in a very big way in Europe, where the younger generation is super into it. I think it's a little bit more fractured here, but there definitely is an element of it for sure.
Younger people in general are more aware. They're paying attention to, people who eat organic food, they'll eat things that are farmed naturally. It's so easy to overlook wine because it's grapes in a bottle, right? But there's so many facets that go into that from the farming perspective. Are they using pesticides? Is it done naturally? Are there organic pieces being used throughout the puzzle? Is it minimal intervention? And people, younger people aren't afraid to ask a wine steward questions about wine. They're not afraid to ask the shop owner, hey, this is what I mean tonight, what should I be looking at? And they're using apps. They're becoming just more informed, is really the short answer. And they're not afraid to take chances.
I've got a couple. I've got a 19 and 21-year-old. And in Italy, the culture is different. The options aren't as large as they are here. And culturally, wine's a big part of what you do. But to your point of when I was like 20 and we were out and stuff like that, I knew what I was going to drink. I'm going to go out. I'm going to get a vodka and tonic. I'm going to get this and get the other thing. my kids have to look at the cocktail list, and they have to see what the specialty cocktails are at that restaurant because they want the experience. They just don't want to have a drink. They want to have it. And I think it may be evolving to wine as more kids travel and get to see it in Europe and come back here and, be the cool kid on the block, right? That tries the stuff.
I do think that European influence has been huge, more so now than ever. That people are coming back from their vacations, whether it's Italy or wherever it may be, and then they want to go to a restaurant in Boston. They say, oh, I had this in Italy, or whatever the case may be, tying it together.
Working in the family, how do you guys settle disputes?
That's awesome.
They still all go. They're happening right now.
Yeah. We do okay. We're able to be very candid with each other. Like, fortunately, there's no HR department right now because we can get heated sometimes. But we always end up on the right side of things. And sometimes it's just take a little break, come back and chat about it an hour or two later, and things always work out.
I was going to say arm wrestling probably wouldn't go your way.
No,
just saying, just an observation.
Yeah.
What's interesting is we grew up in a family business. Our parents owned a retail paint hardware store. So we were always, and we're 2 years apart, so we were always kind of working in conjunction with each other at a pretty young age. He went to UMass Amherst, I followed him there. Actually, our parents met there. So
go Minutemen.
There you go. I mean, legally, we had to go there if our parents went there.
Yeah.
But so we've always been around each other in that respect. A lot of our friends, we're all friends with each other. But as the younger brother, sometimes I just want to push his buttons, and I'm pretty good at that, which isn't very professional. But I don't know, depends on the day, I guess.
You can take the brothers out of the business.
Yeah, right.
Can't take the business out of the business.
Runs the X, that's right.
Something like that, right?
Talk about some of your trips when you go over to Italy, and what you're looking for. What are the new areas you're looking to explore? You show up at a vineyard or an orchard. What are you looking for? How are you going about what works? What makes sense for your business?
Yeah, well, we'll back it up slightly here. So when we go out and find wines, we're not the type that go to wine fairs or anything like that. We have a small and growing number of really deep relationships with people who are in the know, so to speak, with what's happening. And we are following the wine and the people first, always. We never look for a specific region. We're not like, oh, we need a wine from here to round out the portfolio. If the portfolio ends up being all the same kind of wine because they are all the right wines from all the right people, then so be it. So we're really kind of keeping our ear to the ground, trying to look for the projects that are really authentic and the people that have a really deep conviction and are doing something that is really representative of their land. Really wine that is essentially functional art. This is wine that's not commercial and not a homogenized product, so to speak. That's really what we're looking at.
So where have you mined the most gold? Like in Italy, what regions of Italy have you found the best?
Piedmont for sure.
Oh, sure.
Way up in the north. We love Nebbiolo. I think it's a first among equals grape. I guess you're not supposed to say that because everyone loves Pinot Noir and Burgundy and I do as well, but Barolo, Barbaresco, Roero now as well. These are incredible regions, and the wines are some of the greatest in the world. So we have a pretty deep Nebbiolo selection in the portfolio. We definitely work in, we have contacts in the major regions like Barolo and Barbaresco. We love the wines. We've put a flag in the ground in Roero, which is a region very close to Barolo and Barbaresco, where they grow a lot of Nebbiolo there. They grow the white grape Arnase as well, which is an indigenous variety to there. And we're happy to be working in Roero just as much as Barolo, for instance, because it's a historically relevant region. And there's opportunity there right now. There are young people who have something to prove, and the wines are absolutely incredible. We actually, one of the wines here today is from Roero, but we want to be setting trends if we can, and it's exciting to us.
So we're Piedmont, I would never put on the places I'd want to go in Italy because it's just from the maps, not that sexy. But anybody that talks about Piedmont, they say the best. I mean, talk about the place that's got the purest food of the purest food. I mean, that region right there is supposed to be killer for all that.
Oh, it's amazing. And the time to go is really late fall. You get the truffles, you get the wine. They have their own cattle there. The beef is incredible. And food-wise, it's like you get some of the comfort feel of the South, but with a little more of the technical cooking of the influence from north of them, Switzerland, France, Germany, Austria. And it's an amazing place culturally for food and wine.
Beef carpaccio, fresh shaved white truffles.
Yeah, exactly.
Forget about it.
That's all you need.
Just so you know, Steve and I are not opposed to taking this and doing this remotely.
Right, exactly, exactly. And we need an influencer with us to market it for us.
We're all there.
Talk about your labels. You know, a lot of times, if you're choosing a bottle of wine, you don't want to judge a bottle of wine by its label, but, you know, in a vast world of wines, what goes into the label selection? How do you decide what's going to be on there? How do you do it? Do you do it all in-house? Do you have an artist? This
is what makes it a little bit difficult for what we do. We don't influence the labels in any way. These labels all come from the people who made the wine. If we could, we would actually import the full Italian labels without any English on it at all. Part of our goal is to minimize ourselves as much as possible and just be the voice for the authenticity behind these bottles of wine. And the reality is, I mean, authentic wine is always representative of where it comes from. The land is first and foremost, but there are people behind the wine as well. And when you get people that are making wine by hand, a part of them is in the wine as well. So the labeling, the styling, all that goes into it. Of course, we like labels more than others. Some labels sell better than others. But if we love the wine and it's the right wine, we will bring it in regardless of label and find the way to sell it. So it's a little bit of an unorthodox way to think about it, but this is our approach.
So you guys are direct to restaurant supplier.
Yeah, we are an importer first.
Yeah.
So we meet the people, buy the wine, bring it here. We self-wholesale it as well. So we're out there working with restaurants, and we do all our own content. We self-warehouse, we self-deliver. Self-warehousing is pretty unusual for a young business of our size as well. We want to do it all ourselves. That's how we keep quality high, and we like having control over that.
Do you sell in Franklin? Is there an opportunity? Okay.
Yeah, for sure.
It's only
it's the
next town over from me. I'll be over. Sure. So wine and social media, right? Now, so if you were going to help these guys, influence these guys, what would be the 3 pictures that you would take that you'd put up on the other than Steve and I drinking wine here at
the 3 pictures?
Yeah.
I would definitely do. My big thing with any type of photography when it comes to social media is the energy behind it, because you can have just a glass of wine on a table. If you have someone laughing with the glass of wine on a table, it's a completely different story because that energy attracts people. So the objective would be people laughing, having a good time, cheers, showing the experience behind it, and then going to Italy and taking the picture. And stemming off of that Italian influence today, I actually brought some meatballs from a recent influencer visit that I had at Sonia, because as much as I'd love to be in Italy all the time, I can't. So I catch myself eating as much Italian food as I can while I'm here.
Sonia, a former MRA Together We Win podcast guest.
Yes.
So we've really come full circle.
Love it.
Listen, North End's awesome. You want to see a beautiful restaurant and a beautiful build-out, it's gorgeous. I mean, very beautiful. And staff is killer. I mean, convenience. You got a parking lot. You don't have to fight for Hanover Street parking.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So you talked about the brownie getting 23,000 likes. What do you think what jump-started that brownie? Why was it, were you building to that moment? Or was there something else going on with the brownie? You know, why was that brownie the tipping point that made it legit?
So one of the fun parts of my page that I stay authentic to is I started as a portrait photographer. I had not dabbled in food yet, hadn't dabbled in drink photography. So when you scroll back all the way on my page in 2019 and right at the beginning of it, I did delete a lot. I did, but we stayed authentic to some of them so you can see the progression. When that brownie was posted, it was a camera photo, and I started on an iPhone. My content just continued to increase, and as I started seeing more results, I was like, okay, I need to curate this more. And then as Instagram changed and turned more into a video platform, then I also had to adjust to that as well, like all of these different adjustments. But that was a pivotal moment of, okay, I started taking higher quality content, and then every time I've hit that, it was just a new milestone of trying a new technique, trying some new method or some new hook or whatever the means were to try to draw in new people.
There's a message there for everybody that's got a phone camera that they should go back in their history and delete a lot.
Probably, yes.
That's a good message.
Yes.
Not just on the business for everybody.
Most definitely.
Right.
If you are, a lot of people want to be influencers. What's the best advice you'd give to an aspiring influencer? Kerry might want to be an influencer. What's he going to do? Besides delete the photos, but then what's step 2 going to be?
The best advice I could give to anyone that wanted to be an influencer is just to be yourself. Like, if you're going to put yourself online, don't try to be an online presence that you can't be authentic to. Because I think there's far too many people that try to be someone they're not online, and then it halts their career because in person, they're a completely different person, and then no relationships are being made.
Yep.
And there's just these two identities that are constantly fighting, and it just needs to be cohesive and aligned. And it makes it a lot easier too, because if you can just authentically be yourself and also not conforming too much to the standards of what you're supposed to be doing, that's something I've struggled with as an artist and an actual photographer and videographer. A lot of influencers just use their phone. For me, sometimes I struggle to make it too production-like because it's my passion and I enjoy it. And I've had some people say, hey, if you did it this way, you might perform better. But authentically to me, doing it on my camera and doing these things is who I am. And I don't want to steer too far away from that.
It's so interesting. There's so much noise in that space right now and the channels that people are pushing their content through. There's specific areas that you will use or won't use as far as...
Yes. I've had a lot of people pushing me for TikTok in particular to get more on there as like a personality presence. And it's important just for people to know who I am. But at the same time, I have been a little bit more reserved because my true craft has been in the actual content creation with myself behind the camera, holding the camera, not on the other side of it. And it's a gray area. It's tough trying to make that decision in terms of what pathways you should be taking, and there's so many you can take too.
Oh yeah.
How do you guys amplify a new voice in the wine industry? How do you stand out amongst the noise?
It's not always easy. I think we're still trying to find the right ways to do it, but authenticity is a huge part of it for us. I look at everything in wine as a slow burn, and that's fine. So what we're doing, we have a lot of focus on Instagram, generally speaking. We probably write a little more than we should, but it's all very genuine to how we feel about the wines and what we believe they are. And over time, there's a hope that like little bites at a time, that you just brick by brick build it up and people notice it. And we do notice traction that way, and it does help. We interview everybody we work with. They have amazing things to say. So interesting just to learn more about the wine, the regions, why they do what they do. And we give the interviews to all of our customers. We put them on Instagram as well, on our website. We send emails to our distribution list of customers with the interviews as well. It's really part of trying to, again, with our message, we want to minimize ourselves as much as possible and just have it be unfiltered. Really, it's all about the wine for us, basically, and it's a super important thing. But we're really still trying to find the right ways to like have everything work together in like harmony.
We want to tell someone's story.
Yeah,
that's really what it comes down to. Minimize it as best we can of ourselves.
Yeah, if we're learning anything, and we're trying to create that too, because we live in a kind of a dusty world of associations, and not necessarily the first one to the party for technology. We're becoming better at it. But I think we're learning it. It has to live here, and it has to live here in under 2 minutes. I mean, and it has to be video-based, and to your point, it has to tell a story, right? So there's a lot of this going on a daily basis. And again, I don't necessarily buy into the TikTok either, but there's a lot of people that are floating through that 20, 30 minutes a day.
It's funny, because that's actually where we used to argue. Like Instagram is a very visual thing. And sometimes we'd bring on a new wine producer, and I'd do some writing about it. And Caden would be like, well, this is 4 paragraphs long. Like, no one's going to read it. I'm like, however.
We buy wine by the barrel, not the ink, not ink by the barrel, right?
But a few people will read it and will be really interested in it. And I look at it as like our portfolio of what we're doing. Like, want the people who are really interested to be like, wow, these people are credible. Like, they're going miles deep into something. And that's our foundation, so to speak. So it's probably breaking a few rules. But again, going back to authenticity, we've leaned into that so far and not looking back, so to speak.
Yeah.
Talk about some of the wines we've been experiencing today, because I've just been, you keep pouring and I keep drinking.
So this is, we're excited about everything we bring in, but these 3 wines in particular are really, I think, near and dear to us. So going back to the comment on Sangiovese and
This is in your glass right now.
The first wine we had actually is a Sangiovese. It's from a young woman named Chiara Condello in Prodapia, Romagna.
Really good.
And interestingly enough, Prodapia is this historic region where they have the native clone of Sangiovese. So everything from Tuscany originated actually in the foothills of the Apennines in Prodapia. And with various regions in Italy for a lot of different reasons, right? Trends kind of come and go. Prodapio had been somewhat forgotten in recent decades. And Chiara came along. She learned winemaking from her grandfather, who was a garagiste, which is really like garage wine, so to speak, very, very local thing. She was supposed to have a white-collar job in Milan post-grad, decided to go back home and dedicate herself to winemaking. And she really was the first person in this historic region to go back to making wine in this ancient way she learned from her grandfather. And like, we see this story a lot. Everyone says, you're crazy, you have to modernize. This is how the market recognizes the wine again. And she stuck to her conviction. And now, not only is she the greatest grower in Prodapio, but she's one of Italy's most famous winemakers as well. And just the conviction behind what she's doing, there's so much emotion in the wine. And this is the kind of wine, it's so different than Tuscan wine, I'm sure, as you could tell, but you put this alongside the great Brunellos and her wines, that you can tell why Prodapio is such a historic region. And it's pretty amazing stuff.
So smooth. It's really, 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 really kind of a light, but got a nice taste.
It's got an elegant touch to it. Part of the secret, so Prodapio, they're clone of Sangiovese Piccolo. It's smaller berries, thicker skins than what is evolved in Tuscany. And the tannin level is very high, but it's a very like smooth tannin. You almost don't even notice it, but there is a lot of structure there. It's harmonious, I guess, for lack of a better word.
So from your website, I know that you're very specific to the countries that you, and you told about Italy and the regions too, right? Why not France? Why not some of the other places around that are notorious for creating great wine?
It's a really good question. I think there are only so many things we can be doing at once. And when we started the business, there was so much opportunity in Italy. As I said, we love Piedmont and Nebbiolo. We already had a lot of contacts there. We wanted to build a deep foundation in one area and then grow from there. And kind of by chance, we've been able to, sprout little footprint in Germany and Basque Country and Spain and a little bit domestically as well. Not necessarily things we were looking for, but things that fell in our lap that were truly compelling. I look at France as it's a whole different mountain to climb. I think we'll get there as well. I do love French wine, but it's, a different iteration of the business when there's a much deeper infrastructure there. But we're happy going really deep into smaller areas as well.
Should we get into the Sprague Energy lightning round? Hot and heavy questions coming at you. You got to keep your head on a swivel. You never know where we're going to go.
Exactly.
Let's do it.
It's your last meal on Earth. What is it going to be?
This is such a hard one.
Not that anybody that's your contractor was listening to this
right,
stuff.
Exactly.
Some form of omakase.
It would have to be a veal parm with gnocchis and specifically a pink vodka sauce, like pink cream sauce. I'm in.
Something with white truffle. Maybe just shaved over eggs, something like that. Like kind of simple, but pretty amazing.
Okay. What's your ideal vacation spot?
This is evolving the older that I get. Probably Italy, northern Italy. Just
probably check out some wine when you're there.
Yeah, I think so. I get more outdoorsy as I get older, and being in the foothills of the mountains is pretty spectacular, and there's a lot of depth and range to that kind of vacation.
I would say any old school European city, somewhere I can walk around, eat really good food, have good drink, and keep it authentic. What are the locals drinking? What are they eating? Where can I just dive in and become a local for a day or for a week? I'd like to say just hanging out on the beach, but I need to move too much. I need to move around. I need to see something.
Piggybacking, probably the same anywhere Amalfi Coast, but going a little bit further in off the tourist path and having those more authentic experiences, and maybe even going in someone's home, having some fresh pasta and maybe not understanding what they're saying.
Just knocking on the door and walking in, just like,
People,
what are we having?
They're pretty friendly and they may actually invite you in.
You haven't lived unless you've driven the beach road in Amalfi, on the Amalfi Coast. It's just
that's fun.
The most magnificent thing ever.
That's awesome.
Caden, who's inspired you the most?
Who has inspired me the most in the realm of life?
The Sprague Lightning Round is some deep questions. We have really evolved from which Boston sports team is going to be on a duck boat next, and which comedy did you like? And what concert did you go to? If you want to answer any of those questions, you can answer those as well.
It's a
your
good
favorite
one.
dessert.
You can see it from so many different angles. If it's like who in the industry has inspired me, who in life has inspired me. Oh dear. I would say in the wine world, a lot of inspiration came from one of like the OG importers, Neil Rosenthal. And that was a lot of, when Jay started getting into wine, I mean, because he took like the hobby to like a passion, like a whole different level. And we kind of grew up, like Jace briefly mentioned, we grew up around wine. Our father had a nice little wine cellar. And as it went along, I didn't love exactly what was in, my dad's gonna hate this. I didn't love what was in his cellar all the time. And I just liked having cocktails. I was a gin and tonic guy for a very long time. And when Jay started doing you know, a wine program and diving in deeper and expanding his palate and what he's tasting, he started bringing around these different wines, a lot of things from France, things from the Loire Valley, you know, Cab Francs and Northern Rhone Syrahs. And these wines I didn't know existed. And most of the time, very early on in what Jace was doing, the wines he brought around, I would turn it over, I'd see Neil Rosenthal's name as the importer. And so, him and Kerman Lynch were kind of like the trailblazers of, you know, wine is real, wine is authentic, it's living, it has a soul. And Jace could probably answer it better, but I think that we take a lot of cues kind of from some of the path that they kind of started forging. So I think that's an inspiration, at least in the wine world, for me.
I guess you could say they're like the classics that the foundation was built on in a sense.
Okay.
Boom.
What's your go-to type of cuisine?
Italian's an easy answer, but seafood specifically.
Seafood Italian.
It's changing. I'm like, a lot of evolution.
We're actually seeing the evolution. We're seeing the evolution before our eyes, you know.
My wife is South Korean, so I would say I have a very soft spot for South Korean food. It can be a slow burn, but over time, it's pretty awesome.
Korean barbecue is the best.
I second that. I'm 50-50 Italian Asian. I'm coming from an Italian family. I have a ton of Italian influence. I love it, but when I dabble into the Asian food, it dominates sometimes.
There's a lot of depth.
Yeah, we talk specifically about Europe a lot here today. But my wife's from Brazil, and I mean, it's where you're at. Wherever you're at, you can find the localest thing, and you know,
absolutely.
The fish came off the boat. You're sitting at the dock where the fish came off the boat, and they pour you a cold beer, and wherever it is.
It doesn't get better than that.
Yeah.
Are you going to skip the inspiration question, or you want to come back to the inspiration question?
We'll come back to the inspiration.
Okay, all right.
My biggest inspiration is my grandmother. So most people knew her as just a woman who worked all the time, but for the relationship I had with her, she was incredibly successful in the real estate world and owned numerous properties. But from what I had seen, she was so passionate. And my biggest mantra in life is, without passion, what is the purpose? And I say that to everyone all the time. I said, if you truly, it doesn't like ignite some fire in your soul, then maybe you should just rethink it a little bit or find something that does. And I always saw that. And whether it was her passion for Cape Cod and the beach, or it was the passion for work, or whatever she was chasing, I never saw her in a state that she was just like mono through it. She was always just fired up, and there was always so much passion involved, and I try to take that with me. Anything I do, I'm just gonna put my all towards it.
Excellent. How do you relax?
How do I relax? I need to do more of that. But it would really be going for walks really early in the morning. I've been on like a 5 a.m. waking up train and going by the waterfront when no one's really awake yet. That's probably the best time for me to try to relax.
Nice. How do you relax?
At this stage in life, I have a 5-year-old daughter, I have a 1-year-old son.
Oh, so you're doing a ton of relaxing.
Oh, yeah. But my favorite piece is on like Saturday morning, maybe 10:30, the little guy's gonna take a nap. So I have him in the nook of my arm. I have my daughter probably sitting somewhere down by my legs on the couch, and we're watching some silly kids movie. But it's like, awesome. I can take a breather, I can sit and just like breathe in the family for a few minutes, and that's a nice way to relax.
Absolutely.
And a bottle of wine at night is a good one too.
or during that time, you know, whatever.
Mesh it together.
How do you relax?
I like to meditate, actually. It's good.
All right, if you could have dinner with anyone, living or dead, who would it be?
Andy Warhol. And I would ask about his like artistic inspiration, and I feel like it would probably be the strangest conversation I'd ever have. And just having that conversation go wherever it would go, and try to understand his art. And he was a big art inspiration for me. That would be it.
That wouldn't be a quick dinner.
No. That would be a very long dinner.
Yeah.
My brain's not quick enough to figure out like the who not living, because that's like a great rabbit hole. And I could come up with, when I'm driving out of here, I'm gonna come up with something great.
Like, I should have said.
Living, I would say Jimmy Page, guitarist of Led Zeppelin. He's the reason I picked up a guitar when I was 11 years old, and I would love to sit down and pick his brain.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I honestly don't know. Nothing's coming to mind. There are too many, I think. Give me a sec to ruminate on it and come back to me.
Have another sip and come back.
We'll do a follow-up episode. It's energy questions, live answers. So.
I think there should be an AI thing so you could really set your expectations of what that dinner would actually look like, right? On the back end of it, like, wait, that wasn't what I expected.
Mm-hmm.
We have Jace and Caden Chaffee from Vine Farmer. We have Paige Harding, Boston, Dining Boston influencer. Thank you all for joining the MRA Together We Win podcast. This was really fun.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you, and thanks for the wine.
The wine was awesome.
This is a great way to spend a Wednesday afternoon.
I'm not sure Eric can come on yet. We got to finish the wine.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
Got to sit on the sidelines. This
All right.
is awesome.
Is it like kosher to go into one more wine real quickly? Like
Yeah,
one
let's
minute
go.
thing?
I want to try the white.
It's
I haven't tried the
actually
white yet.
Yeah, we haven't touched that.
Yeah,
I haven't.
it's the white. It's something relatively special that we're happy to share with you. So this wine in particular is from a really good friend named Renato and his partner Elisa. They are from Brico Ernesto back in Roero now. So we're going back up to Piedmont. And they've become very good friends of ours recently. And they are like the epitome of it. Like when I think about why we got in this business and what we're looking for, like this kind of people that make you float out of the room when you have the wine to meet them. They're at this little hilltop up in Roero, and they make 4,000 bottles a year between two different wines on a scale where it's like they're destemming grapes by hand. They talk about how no one else touches the vines in the vineyard because there's an energy they share with the vines and a vibration that's otherwise lost. And when you're like, these are some of Italy's most allocated wines. They're figuring out their allocations a few years in advance. And they're the kind of wines you can't understand all at once. It takes multiple days to have it. But this is really what it's all about when we think about wine as liquid art and just something that is greater than the sum of its parts and something that, communicates the land, but there's the people and the art behind it. And it's just something that we're super fortunate to be able to offer and have. We only get 60 bottles a year of this wine.
Really?
We really wanted to bring one today though. So it's not necessarily a commercially available one, but it's like, this is the kind of thing that excites me so much. Just these people and what they do. The grape is Arnase. The indigenous variety to Roero, where it really is not super successful anywhere else. It's a really misunderstood grape, but they're elevating it with a small number of other growers to this level where it's, you throw this in a lineup with the finest French wines and doesn't skip a beat at all. This is really, really something profound.
You haven't been yet, but our first trip we did Rome and all that stuff, but we went to San Gimignano and we stayed in like a castle in San Gimignano, and the Vernaccia was the varietal there. And you go around and these little tiny wineries, and the farmer's daughter would like open up the gate, right? You'd go in and you taste these wines and they're like $2 a bottle, and it was like incredible. This is, I'm sure it's not $2 a bottle.
Definitely more expensive, but there are values to be had always.
Yeah.
VFwines.com. Paige, how can operators get a hold of you
on Instagram, Dining Boston.
At Dining Boston. All right. Thank you all.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Steve, with marketing being one of the Achilles heels for restaurateurs, who's our go-to for marketing, public relations, and social media?
That's going to be our great friends at IUC, Image Unlimited Communications. Maddie, where can we find you?
You can find us on socials at IUC Boston.
Or also on web, iucboston.com.
Thanks, Lily.
Yeah.
IUC.
Woo.
Follow us.